Hello everyone, I'm the Cheshire Raccoon, and this is my first episode of Slow Roast Canon, where I roast the canon at 400 degrees and carve it for the juicy bits. Well, in this episode I'm going to be talking about Star Trek the Animated Series and its place in the greater canon of Star Trek. So for those of you who don't know, the Animated Series is a series of Star Trek that came out pretty close after the original series, like in the early 70s. And was considered to be more or less a follow-up to it. Now, there is a lot of debate on whether or not it is technically Star Trek canon, and I'm going to go over why it was thought to not be, why now it's kind of accepted as it, and my personal thoughts on all this. Now, I should have the disclaimer here that some of this has been researched, and actually there's a really cool little booklet in the DVD of the animated series that talks about, the canonization of it, which is where I got the idea for this video. I also looked on trekmovies.com. So first I'm going to talk about what kind of has made it non-canon, or the arguments people bring up when they talk about it being non-canon. The big argument for it being not canon is that legally it's not canon. Back after the first season of The Next Generation came out, all of the licenses for Star Trek spin-offs were renegotiated, and in that renegotiation process, Gene Roddenberry's office ended up decanonizing the animated series. So legally, according to Roddenberry's office, it is not canon. But that's, the main cornerstone of why people say that it's not canon is because of the legality of it. And another reason why people, I think, kind of brush it to the side is it's very campy. Like, I love it, but the animation is very, 60s, 70s, kind of reminiscent of the original Scooby-Doo and that Spider-Man series that there's all the memes of. Because the colors, a lot of it is very flat. Some of the shading is off. You get that problem where sometimes, things aren't drawn in the place that they're supposed to be, and, they switch places from frame to frame. And what I think is hilarious is the running, because they have that, dream running where they're not moving at the right rate against the background, so it doesn't seem like they're really running, where it's that kind of the dream thing of, oh, I'm going so fast, and the background's only moving past at a different clip as to how I'm supposed to be running. It's not the best. The animation in a lot of the episodes is their budget was a crumpled handful of ones and half a peanut butter sandwich. And of course you have the mega close-ups of Kirk, and I mean, the one good thing about it is I think that in most cases they did capture the looks of the original cast members pretty well. So that's something. And it's also kind of, I think, considered non-canon because the second season won an Emmy, though the Emmy was for the Outstanding Children's Series. It was kind of considered to be, less serious, and I think that's more of the problem now is people look at it and they're like, oh, it's so silly. And so I think the main argument for the non-canon is the Roddenberry thing, and people just see the camp factor and they don't really want to look past that. I've been in the Trek fandom for a really long time, and I'm actually a second generation Trek fan. Two of my aunts were really into it. So I mean, I grew up on it. And I grew up, seeing how they kind of also ignored the animated series. Even my original series, Trekkie aunt. So, I guess that's just kind of the vibe that I've gotten off people from it. But now, after that very brief thing, I want to talk about why it is now considered to be canon. There's been kind of a shift, and it's more accepted today that the animated series was canon, and that it's more or less a follow-up or a fourth season to the original series, which was supposed to run longer than 3 seasons. So, when discussing the canon of it, I think it's important to bring up the cast. They had almost the original entire cast, except Walter Cohen, and the character of Chekhov doesn't show up in it either, which is a shame, but they didn't have the budget to be able to rehire the entire cast. There was a little conflict of originally they were not going to rehire George Takei or Nichelle Nichols, but Leonard Nimoy put his foot down and he said, I will not come back unless you allow Takei and Nichols to come back, because it was very important to have this multiracial perspective on the Enterprise. And because Nichols was one of the 2 female characters that existed at that point, because poor Janice Rand got a really bad deal. But anyway, it has most of the original series cast, and I think that alone should be enough, is enough that most people regard it as kind of like, okay, we can call this canon. And I think this has especially kind of been the attitude since 2009, when Star Trek The Reboot came out. Because The Reboot has Spock Prime in it, who is played by Leonard Nimoy. It is the original Spock. And my take on this was that Abrams and the writers were kind of going for having the original Spock to lend a kind of credibility and legitimize their reboot and be like, look, we have it grounded in the original series, even though it's this whole other universe, alternate timeline thing. And I feel like if they could pull that, then it's kind of hard to avoid acknowledging the animated series as canon because it has the original voice actors. And what I really want to talk about with the canon is it also has some of the original writers, including the amazing writer DC Fontana. Fontana has gone on record stating that she always considered the animated series to be canon because she and the other writers took steps to have it continue to encapsulate the general soul of the original series, where it's, going out and exploring unknown worlds and doing good and helping people. And that she really thought that the animated series did carry that on. And Fontana did write several non-canon Star Trek novels. I have some Star Trek novels behind me. I don't know if Fontana is in the first row, but I have read a couple of her books. And I really enjoy them. And I think that she, and having other original series writers, definitely lends legitimacy to it, because not only did she make a concerted effort to carry on the original spirit of Star Trek, she also, worked on the original series herself. She was part of the writing of Journey to Babel, Friday's Child. She was one of several people that worked on the script for City on the Edge of Forever. Some of the stuff that she wrote in the 3rd season, where I believe she was hired as a freelancer, she wasn't officially part of the writers of the show by the 3rd season, but she did write Way to Eden, which is alright. The Enterprise Incident, which I love the Enterprise Incident. I think that is a magnificent episode. And That Which Survives was another one that she wrote in the 3rd season. And she worked earlier on Tomorrow is Yesterday, which is also a good time travel episode. So, I mean, you have an original writer who's worked on episodes like Journey to Babel and the Enterprise Incident, which are just such big pieces of the original series canon and are incredibly important. Especially Journey to Babel. That's one of my favorite episodes. So, I mean, just by having that writer, should be acknowledged that this is canon. Now, what I kind of want to get to with all this is the animated series is more or less considered canon now, but with kind of the attitude that it hasn't necessarily always been canon. Like now, the Star Trek Wiki, Memory Alpha, which is all the canon materials, has Star Trek the Animated Series, and that's within the past few years, I believe, that it hasn't always been present on that wiki. For a while it was relegated to Memory Beta, which is non-canon like the novels and the video games. But what I believe, and what is perhaps the entire point of this episode of Slow Roast Canon, is that Star Trek the Animated Series was always canon. No matter what people said about it, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but even disregarding the legality of the canon and what Roddenberry's office said. I think it has always been canon. And this is for some of the reasons that I listed before, why it's canon now. You know, it's has the writer DC Fontana, it has most of the original cast. But what people forget about the animated series is that there are pieces of it that were talked about as canon in later Star Trek series. And one of these pieces of animated series that carried on into future canon is the presence of Robert April as the first captain of the Enterprise. And this was mentioned in the animated series episode, The Counterclock Incident. The biggest part of this animated series carrying on that I want to address is Spock's mother's full name. Now, there are 7 or 8 episodes in the original series that either mention or explicitly feature Spock's mother, Amanda. And she shows up in at least 2 of the movies, but I'm not going to talk about those because those came out after the animated series. But in the original series, she's generally only mentioned as, like, Spock's human mother, or the human wife of Sarek. She's not mentioned by name in The Naked Time, or at least a few others of them. The Naked Time is the one I've seen the most recently, except for Journey to Babel, which I rewatched for this video. Journey to Babel is the only episode where Amanda shows up in the episode, and she's there with Sarek for this whole diplomat thing. And in that episode, she is referred to as Amanda. At one point, Kirk asks her what her full name is, and she says basically he wouldn't be able to pronounce the Vulcan surname, and that he should just call her Amanda. Her last name is never referred to in this episode, and I think of all the episodes that she appears in to some degree, that would be the one most likely to hold her last name. Now, in the animated series, in the episode of Yesteryear, which is in the first season, Spock and Kirk end up messing around with the Guardian of Forever and messing with a fixed time stream, making it so that Spock doesn't go back in time and save his younger self. So in this new alternate time they've created, Spock does not exist. And he has to end up, using the Guardian to go back in time again. When, they're all gathered in the conference room discussing what happened to Spock in this timeline. And she's mentioned explicitly as Amanda Grayson, and that is a name that has carried on throughout the rest of Star Trek canon and is used by the fandom as her full name. And I don't know if people in the fandom know that this is the original, this is where her name was originally mentioned. I didn't before I watched the animated series. I thought that Grayson was a piece of fanon that had existed for so long, it was just kind of accepted. But no, it was the animated series that originally had this. So, there are pieces of the animated series that are considered to be canon throughout the rest of the series, which I believe is one of the greatest arguments for that it has always been canon. And, of course, that is all the technical aspect of it. But the last thing I want to talk about of why it has always been canon is because of the nature of the series itself. It does, I believe, for all intents and purposes, hold on to the original purpose of Star Trek. It's progressive sci-fi. It's, in the Lorelei signal, Uhura takes over the ship because the men have been rendered useless by this, alien, this hot female alien race. And, she takes over the ship, and with Christine Chapel, they rescue the captain. You have episodes like that. It's a series that I think deserves its spot as the 4th season of the original. And not only does it hold on to that, but the animation, for as campy as it is, can be used to explore things that they couldn't have explored in the live-action original series. There's an episode with anti-gravity, where, they're just kind of floating around in the corridors. And I don't remember what that one is called, but I know I've watched it. And what I love is that the aliens are so weird. In the first episode of the animated series, they find this big, cool alien ship and are walking through it in a scene that could not have been done live action. And there are, these neon cat aliens, and there's the shape-shifting alien in Survivor that's just like this weird squid thing. They are able to do more with their campy animation than the original series could have done live action, even if it had had a better budget, because the original series did not have a great budget, and they did a lot with what they were given. But still, I think for the time, they couldn't have accomplished the things that they were able to do in the animated series through the medium of animation. So, all in all, this has been Slow Roast Canon. Star Trek the Animated Series was always canon. Thanks for watching.